A cruel millionaire humiliates a street girl without imagining that one day he would need her. When her daughter suffers a serious accident, only a rare blood type can save her. In an act of generosity, the girl donates her own blood and disappears without a trace. Overcome with regret, the millionaire begins a desperate search to find her and reward her. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, tell us which city you're watching us from, and we'll keep going. The afternoon. Sun glinted off the huge windows of the Miller Building in the heart of the city's financial district. From the 40th floor, Alex Miller looked out over the city like an emperor surveying his kingdom. At 45, he had built a business empire that lived up to his surname on the building's facade. His angular face and stern expression matched his impeccable Italian suit, while his calculating green eyes scanned the numbers in the latest financial report. "Mr. Miller, your daughter Isabel is on the line," his secretary announced over the intercom. Alex sighed. Her only daughter at 16 was the only person capable of disrupting her meticulously planned routine. "Put her through, Frida." "Dad, you promised you'd come to my ballet rehearsal today?" The teenage voice sounded somewhere between cheerful and accusatory. "Isabel, you know I have an important meeting with Chinese investors," he began but was interrupted. "You always have important meetings, Dad. It's the last rehearsal before the main performance. Please?" Alex glanced at the gold watch. On his wrist, a gift he had given himself when he made his first million. "I'll try, daughter. I can't promise, but I'll try." The truth is that Alex had a complex relationship with his daughter. Since his wife, Lena, had left 5 years ago, he had immersed himself even more in work, as if each new million-dollar contract could fill the void that was left. Isabel was practically raised by housekeepers and chauffeurs, living in a gilded bubble in the family's luxurious apartment. After hanging up the phone, Alex turned his attention to the meeting he had in a few minutes. The Chinese group was interested in buying a significant stake in his technology company, and he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. As he organized the documents, his mind wandered back to the time when he began his rise. 15 years ago, he was just another ambitious executive, a minority partner in a promising company alongside Eric Vasquez. Eric was your typical old-school businessman, concerned with social responsibility and business ethics, concepts that Alex considered outdated and detrimental to true progress. The opportunity to take control of the company came during an economic downturn. Alex manipulated contracts, falsified some documents, and within months, Eric was out. It was all perfectly legal, or at least seemingly legal. Alex had always prided himself on his cleverness at finding loopholes, his ability to make the system work for him. "Mr. Miller, the investors have arrived," Frida's voice interrupted his reminiscences. Alex straightened his tie and put on his best business smile. As he walked to the conference room, he passed a hallway decorated with his achievements, covers of business magazines, Businessman of the Year awards, photos with politicians and celebrities. It was his own little museum of success. The meeting went exactly as planned. Alex was a master negotiator, knowing exactly when to push and when to back down. 3 hours later, when he shook hands with the Chinese businessman, he had secured a 500 million reais investment in his company. It was already past 7 o'clock when he finally left the office. The city sky was tinged with orange and purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear between the skyscrapers. His driver was waiting for him in the garage with the armored Mercedes. "Home, sir?" the driver asked. Alex hesitated for a moment, remembering his promise to his daughter, but the rehearsal should have ended long ago. "Yes, home. But first, let's stop by Le Petit. I want to celebrate the closing of the contract with a proper dinner." Le Petit was his favorite French restaurant, a low-key, elegant establishment where a meal could easily cost more than 1,000 reais per person. Alex liked the place not only for the exceptional food, but also because he was always surrounded by people of his level. As the car glided through the city streets, Alex did not realize that that night would mark the beginning of a profound transformation in his life. Fate was about to present him with a bill that all his money would not be able to pay, and a lesson that no business school could teach. What he didn't yet know is that sometimes our cruelest actions have a peculiar way of coming back to haunt us, and that even the most powerful men can be bent by the weight of their own choices. Le Petit was particularly busy that evening. The maitre d' greeted Alex with his usual bow, leading him to his preferred table, strategically positioned near the window overlooking the restaurant's inner garden. The aroma of fresh herbs and elaborate sauces filled the room, mingling with the elegant hum of conversation and the soft clink of crystal glasses. "The usual, Mr. Miller?" asked the sommelier, already holding a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, 1982. "Yes, Philippe. And bring the full tasting menu," Alex replied, without even looking at the menu. While he waited, he checked his messages on his phone. There were 3 missed calls from Isabel. He ignored them, promising himself that he would make it up to his daughter over the weekend. It was when he finished his order that the first disturbance of the evening occurred. A small commotion near the entrance to the restaurant caught his attention. A girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old had managed to get past the reception and was now moving between the tables asking for food. Her dark hair was disheveled, and her clothes, although not completely dirty, betrayed her precarious condition. Alex watched in disgust as the staff tried to discreetly lead her out. The girl, however, showed surprising determination. Her large, dark eyes scanned the room with a mixture of hope and despair. "Excuse me, sir," she approached his table. "Could you give me some food? I haven't eaten in 2 days." The businessman felt his face heat up with anger. How dare that child invade his moment of celebration? How had the security guards allowed her to get there? "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice sharp. "This is a high-end establishment, not a popular restaurant." The girl did not back down. There was something in her gaze that deeply disturbed him, a dignity that seemed to challenge his position of power. "Please, sir, just a piece of bread." It was then that Alex did something that shocked even the customers at the neighboring tables. He took the plate of foie gras that had just been served and with a theatrical movement dumped it into the trash can next to the table. "Better to feed the rats than support bums," he declared, loud enough for everyone around to hear. The silence that followed was deafening. The girl didn't cry, didn't scream. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on his with a disturbing intensity. For the briefest of moments, Alex felt something strange, as if he had seen that look before. Finally, the security guards showed up and took the girl away. The maitre d' approached, apologizing profusely for the incident. Alex waved away the apology impatiently, but something had changed. Dinner had lost its flavor. As he drove home in his Mercedes, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl. There was something familiar about her, something that bothered him deeply. Maybe it was her eyes. They were the same dark shade as Eric Vasquez's. In his penthouse apartment, he found Isabel still awake, sitting at the piano in the living room. She was playing a melancholy melody, one of those she had learned from her mother. "You didn't come," she said without stopping playing. "I had an important meeting, dear. You know how it is." "There always is," Isabel replied, her fingers gliding smoothly over the keys. "You know, Dad, sometimes I wonder if you remember what it was like before, when Mom was here." The mention of Lena made Alex pour himself a generous shot of whiskey. He didn't like to think about the past, about the promises he had made to his wife on her final bed. "Go to sleep, Isabel. We'll talk tomorrow." Alone in his office, Alex gazed out at the city through the apartment windows. The city stretched on forever, a sea of light and shadow. Somewhere below, a girl with familiar eyes wandered the streets. What he didn't know was that the encounter at the restaurant was just the first act of a much larger story. Fate had begun to move its pieces, and soon Alex Miller would discover that all the money in the world couldn't buy redemption. That night, as he tried to sleep in his Egyptian cotton sheets, a nagging feeling haunted him. It was as if those dark, accusing eyes of the girl from the restaurant had pierced his armor of arrogance, reaching a place inside him that had long been dormant. The next morning, Alex woke up with a restlessness he couldn't explain. Breakfast was served on the balcony, as always, with perfectly cut fruit, artisanal breads, and freshly squeezed juice, but he barely touched it. The image of that girl in the restaurant continued to haunt him. "Frida, I need you to do some research for me," he said into the phone as his driver took him to the office. "I want information on Eric Vasquez, everything you can find from the last 10 years. "You mean your former partner?" the secretary asked hesitantly. "Exactly. And Frida, be discreet." At the office, a surprise awaited him. Mari Vasquez, the wife of a distant cousin of Eric's, was sitting at the reception desk. Alex had not seen her for years, since the days when they had moved in the same social circles. "Mari, what are you doing here?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "We need to talk, Alex, about the past, and about a child." Alex's heart raced. He led her to his office, dismissing all the morning meetings. Mari looked different. Her grey hair and the wrinkles around her eyes told the story of years of hardship. "You saw her yesterday, didn't you?" Mari began as soon as they sat down. "The girl at the restaurant." Alex felt his blood run cold. "How did you—" "Her name is Clara. She's Eric's daughter." Mari paused, letting the weight of that revelation hang in the air. "The same girl you humiliated last night." The words hit Alex like a punch. Memories began to surface. Tense meetings, altered documents, an empire built on another man's ruins. "After you destroyed Eric," Mari continued, her voice thick with bitterness, "he was never the same. He lost everything, his company, his home, his dignity. Sophia, his wife, tried to hold it together, but—" "Stop," Alex interrupted, standing up. "What happened was a long time ago. It was just business." "Just business?" Mari laughed humorlessly. "Sophia worked 2 jobs to support Clara. When she got sick, she didn't have the money for treatment. The girl was left alone in the world, Alex. Alone because of your greed." The businessman walked to the window, trying to process the information. The girl from the restaurant, Eric's daughter. The same accusing eyes. "What do you want from me, Mari?" "I want you to know the truth, to carry this burden. Clara survives on the streets begging for food while her daughter Isabel takes ballet and piano lessons. Is that fair?" Alex felt a surge of anger. "Don't lecture me. I built all this on my own, with my own effort." "He built on the ruins of others," Mari retorted, standing up. "But the universe has an interesting way of balancing things, Alex. Remember that." When Mari left, Alex remained motionless for long minutes. Her words echoed in his mind, mixing with memories he had tried so hard to bury. The phone rang, bringing him back to reality. It was Frida. "Mr. Miller, I found the information you requested on Eric Vasquez." His voice was hesitant. "Were you—" "Sitting down. Speak. Eric, he left 8 years ago. Sophia, his wife, 3 years ago. They left a daughter, Clara, which disappeared into the system," Alex finished, his voice barely above a whisper. That afternoon, for the first time in years, Alex cancelled all his meetings. He drove aimlessly through the city, his thoughts a storm of guilt and denial. He passed the old building that had housed the company he had shared with Eric, now transformed into a modern business center. At a red light, he saw a family begging for money. The father held a sign, the mother carried a baby. For a moment, he imagined Clara alone on the streets, carrying the weight of her actions. Her cell phone rang. It was Isabel. "Dad, will you come see me dance today? It's the main performance." Alex looked at his watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. "What time does it start?" "At 7, are you coming?" For the first time in a long time, Alex felt something different, a desire to do something right, even if it was small. "I'll be there, Princess. I promise." What he didn't know was that that night held more surprises. Fate was about to intertwine their paths in an even more dramatic way, and Isabel's ballet performance would be just the beginning of a series of events that would change his life forever. The city's municipal theater was resplendent that night. Alex arrived half an hour early, something unprecedented in his timed routine. Sitting in the front row, he watched the show's program without actually reading it, his mind still troubled by the events of the last few days. The theater was packed, with smiling families, mothers adjusting cameras, fathers carrying flowers. Alex looked down at the bouquet of orchids in his lap, Isabel's favorite, just as they were Lena's. Behind the red curtains on the stage, Dozens of teenage dreams awaited their moment to shine. "Excuse me, Mr. Miller." A middle-aged woman he recognized as Mia, Isabel's ballet teacher, approached with a worried expression. "Could you come with me for a moment? It's about Isabel." Alex felt a tightness in her chest as she followed Mia backstage. The ballerina's dressing room was a whirlwind of tulle, glitter, and teenage nervousness. Isabel sat in a corner, still without makeup, shaking. "Dad!" she exclaimed when she saw him, her eyes brimming with tears. I'm so afraid of making a mistake." "What's wrong, Princess?" Alex sat down beside her, feeling uncomfortably unprepared to deal with emotions, his own or anyone else's. "It's the solo. It's the first time I've danced alone since Mom." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Lena was always in the front row at all of Isabel's performances, always with an encouraging smile on her lips. Alex took her hands in his, noticing how cold they were. "Your mother used to say that fear is just excitement misinterpreted," he said, surprised to remember. "She said the butterflies in your stomach are really little dancing fairies." Isabel gave a weak smile. "Do you remember that?" "I remember more things than I let on," Alex admitted, feeling a pang of guilt for all the times he was absent. At that moment, a commotion at the backstage entrance caught his attention. One of the dancers had fainted, apparently due to nervousness. As everyone rushed to help, Alex noticed a familiar figure watching the scene from the doorway. It was Clara. His heart raced. The girl was wearing a theater uniform. Apparently she worked there as an assistant. Their eyes met for a moment before she disappeared down the hallway. "5 minutes to go," someone announced. Alex turned his attention to Isabel, who now seemed calmer. "I'll be in the front row," he promised, kissing her forehead, "like your mother always was." Back in his chair, Alex couldn't stop thinking about Clara's presence. It was as if the universe was deliberately placing her in his path, forcing him to face the consequences of his actions. The lights dimmed and the music began. The ballet told the story of a young princess who must learn the value of compassion in order to break an ancient curse. Alex watched, mesmerized, as different ballerinas took one after the other on stage. When it was time for Isabel's solo, the entire theater held its breath. She appeared on stage like a moving dream, her soft, precise gestures telling a story of transformation and redemption. In the wings, partially visible, Alex saw Clara, watching the performance, her eyes shining with something that seemed like admiration. It was then that something unexpected happened. At the most important moment of the choreography, Isabel tripped. It was only a second of imbalance, but it was enough for her to lose the rhythm. Panic began to appear on her face, and then, like a miracle, a soft voice began to sing from the wings. It was Clara, singing the melody that accompanied the ballet. Her voice, surprisingly sweet and in tune, served as an anchor for Isabel, who regained her rhythm and completed her performance masterfully. The theater erupted in applause. Alex, with tears in his eyes that he didn't even know he could cry, looked for Clara, but she had already disappeared again. After the performance, while waiting for Isabel to change her clothes, Alex wandered through the theater's corridors, following an impulse he didn't fully understand. He found Clara organizing props in a small storage room. "Why did you help?" "My daughter?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Clara looked at him with those eyes that disturbed him so much. "Because no one deserves to go through difficult times alone," she replied simply, returning to her work. Alex stood there, transfixed by the wisdom contained in that simple answer. A child he had humiliated was showing more humanity than he had ever had. What he didn't know was that that night would only mark the beginning of a series of events that would force him to question everything he believed in. Fate had put Clara in his path for a reason, and he would soon find out what it was. The week after the ballet performance, Alex couldn't concentrate on his work. The image of Clara helping Isabel haunted him, challenging everything he believed about strength and weakness, success and failure. During a particularly boring meeting with shareholders, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Isabel. "Dad, I need to tell you something. It's important." She found her daughter at the cafe near the theater, where she usually had a snack after rehearsals. Isabel looked different. There was a new determination in her eyes, something that reminded her of Lena. "I met Clara," she said bluntly as soon as Alex sat down. "She's been working at the theater for a few months, helping out backstage. Dad, she's amazing. Did you know she gives music lessons to underprivileged kids on the weekends?" Alex felt his stomach churn. "Isabel, you shouldn't—" "What? Approach her?" Isabel interrupted, her eyes shining with a mixture of defiance and disappointment. "Why not? Because she's poor? That's what you always say, isn't it? That we should stay away from people who aren't on our level?" "It's not that simple," Alex tried to argue, but his voice cracked. "It's actually very simple, Father. Clara told me about the day at the restaurant," Isabel continued, her voice shaking slightly. "How could you do that? Throw food in the trash in front of someone who was hungry?" Alex felt the weight of shame like never before. Seeing his own daughter looking at him with disappointment was more painful than any financial loss he had ever suffered. "There's more," Isabel continued, softer now. "Clara showed me an old photo, a photo of her with her parents. The man in the photo was your business partner, wasn't he?" The world seemed to spin around Alex. He didn't expect this revelation to come through his own daughter. "How do you think Mum would feel about this?" Isabel asked, her eyes brimming with tears. "She always taught us about compassion, about helping others." "What happened to you, Dad?" The mention of Lena was like a stab in the back. Alex remembered her last words. "Promise me you'll teach our daughter true values." "I want to help her," Isabel said. "Clara is so talented. She could go to music school and be someone important. But she needs a chance." Alex watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and shame. At some point, she had become wiser than he was. "There's one more thing," Isabel hesitated. "Clara is sick. Nothing serious, but she needs treatment. She didn't want me to tell you." "But why didn't she want to?" Alex asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Because she has pride, Dad. Even after everything she's been through, she's kept her dignity. Something that's worth more than all your money." In that moment, Alex saw clearly the contrast between who he had become and the values that truly mattered. His daughter, just 16 years old, was teaching him a lesson in humanity. "Where is she now?" he finally asked. "At the theater. She always stays late organizing the material for the music classes she gives on the weekend." Alex stood up, leaving some bills on the table to pay for the coffee. "I'll talk to her." "Dad?" Isabel called after him as he was leaving. "Don't mess it up this time." As he walked toward the theater, Alex thought about how a series of bad choices had led him here. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to do the right thing. The sun was beginning to set, painting the city sky with shades of orange and pink. On the horizon, dark clouds were approaching, foreshadowing a storm. Alex didn't know it, but that night would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. The municipal theater was nearly empty when Alex entered. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the historic stained glass windows, creating colorful patterns on the marble floor. Soft music echoed through the halls, piano notes, hesitant but melodious. Following the sound, Alex arrived at a small rehearsal room. Through the half-open door, he saw Clara sitting at the piano, teaching a melody to a girl even younger than her. The scene made him stop, watching in silence. "Very good, Alicia." Clara smiled at her little student. "Remember to practice at home. You can use the electronic keyboard we got at the bazaar." After the girl left, Clara began to organize the sheet music. That was when she noticed Alex's presence. "Have you come to offer me money?" she asked without turning around, "or perhaps to accuse me of manipulating your daughter?" Alex felt the weight of those words. "No," he answered simply. "I came to apologize." Now Clara turned, her eyes meeting his. "Excuses don't feed anyone, Mr. Miller, nor do they bring parents back." "I know." He took a step forward, still keeping a respectful distance. "But it's a start." A distant thunder announced the arrival of the storm. Clara began to cough, a dry and worrying cough that confirmed what Isabel had said about her health. "Why did you help Isabel during the presentation?" Alex asked, repeating the question he had asked days ago, but now genuinely interested in the answer. Clara sat down at the piano again, playing a few soft notes. "You know what my father always said, that music has the power to heal souls. He played the piano for children in the hospital, you know, for free, of course. He said that some things are worth more than money. Alex felt his defenses begin to crumble. Eric was a good man, he admitted for the first time in years. I was wrong. Yes, he was, Clara agreed, but there was no bitterness in her voice. But you know what's interesting? Isabel has the same kind heart he had. She must take after her mother. The indirect mention of Lena made Alex approach the piano. Can I sit? Clara nodded. Alex took the space next to her on the piano bench, keeping a respectful distance. My wife, Lena, she also believed in the power of music, he began, his voice softer than usual. She taught music at a public school, you know? Before I left, Clara added gently. Isabel told me. A silence settled between them, filled only by the sound of the rain that was beginning to fall outside. Those children you teach. Alex hesitated. Are they all like that girl? Alicia? Yes, children who would never have access to music otherwise. I use the money I earn here at the theater to buy used instruments, sheet music. Another coughing fit interrupted her, this time louder. Alex noticed how pale she looked in the dim light of the room. You need to get treatment, he said, not as an order but as a request. And abandon my students. I can't. They depend on these classes. For some, it's the only joy of the week. Alex looked at the piano, at the keys that held so many stories. What if? What if you didn't have to choose? If you could get treatment and continue teaching? Clara looked at him suspiciously. I don't want your charity, Mr. Miller. It's not charity, he replied quickly. It's an attempt to fix something I broke a long time ago. At that moment, Isabel appeared at the door of the room, soaked from the rain. She looked at the two sitting at the piano and smiled. So, you guys are finally talking. Clara smiled back. Your father is trying. Dad, Isabel stepped closer. Remember when Mom said that music had the power to build bridges? Alex nodded, feeling something strange in his throat. Lena always talked about bridges, between people, between social classes, between different worlds. Maybe, he said slowly, it's time to build some bridges. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city, and somehow also washing something inside Alex. What he didn't know yet was that conversation on the piano would be just the beginning of a much bigger transformation. The following weeks brought a subtle but significant change in Alex Miller's life. The businessman, once so focused solely on numbers and profits, now found himself dividing his time between the office and the little world of music and hope that Clara had created. Initially reluctant, Clara accepted Alex's help with her medical treatment on the condition that he also supported her music teaching project. What began as a moral obligation soon turned into a genuine interest for Alex. One Saturday afternoon, he found himself sitting in the back of a makeshift classroom at a community center, watching Clara teach a group of children. Her dedication was palpable, her patience endless as she taught the little ones how to play their first notes on donated violins and flutes. Dad, look! Isabel, who was now volunteering to attend the classes, pointed to a boy of about 8, who had just mastered a complicated sequence on the violin. Alex smiled, surprised at himself for feeling proud of a child he didn't even know. He's talented, he commented. Everyone does, Clara approached after the class ended. They just need a chance. Those words echoed in Alex's mind for days. In his office, between meetings, he found himself thinking about the children in the project, about how a simple musical instrument could open up a world of possibilities. It was during one of these reflections that Frida, his secretary, entered with a worried expression. Mr. Miller, the council is demanding an urgent meeting. It seems there are rumors about changes in your priorities. Alex frowned. What kind of rumors? Well, sir, they say you've been getting involved in social projects, that you're considering directing part of the company's profits to, she hesitated, philanthropic causes. For a moment, Alex felt the old irritation rise up. How dare they question his decisions? But then he remembered Clara's smile as she taught, the joy on the children's faces as they made music. Schedule the meeting, Frida, and prepare. A detailed report on the social impact of companies that invest in education and culture. The secretary looked at him in surprise but nodded and left. That night, Alex arrived home to find Isabel at the piano playing a melody he didn't recognize. "It's beautiful," he commented, sitting down next to her. "Whose is it?" Isabel smiled, a little shyly. "Mine. Clara is teaching me composition." Alex felt a rush of emotion. His daughter creating music, Lena would be so proud. "You know, Dad," Isabel continued, her fingers still dancing over the keys. "Clara told me more about the past, about how you and her father were partners." Alex tensed but let her continue. "She doesn't hold grudges, you know. She says her father always believed that people could change, that everyone deserves a second chance." The words hit Alex like a punch to the stomach. Eric, even after everything, still believed in him. "Isabel," he began, his voice cracking, "I've made a lot of mistakes. I've hurt people." "I know, Dad," she interrupted him gently. "But what's important is what we do from now on, isn't it?" At that moment, looking at his daughter, Alex understood that he was facing a turning point in his life. The choices he made from then on would affect not only him, but future generations. "You're right," he said finally. "It's time to do things differently." What Alex didn't know was that his resolve to embrace change was about to be tested in ways he never imagined. Fate still had cards to play, and not all of them would be easy to deal. The conference room at the top of the Miller building was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Alex stared at the board members, men and women in expensive suits who looked at him with a mixture of confusion and disapproval. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice firm, "I understand your concerns. But what I'm proposing is not just philanthropy, it's a paradigm shift." One of the advisors, Carlo Fischer, leaned forward. "Alex, we understand your sudden interest in social causes, but diverting 20% of profits to educational projects, that's crazy." Alex took a deep breath, remembering Clara's advice. "Show them that doing good can also be good for business." "It's not crazy, Carlo, it's long-term thinking." Alex activated the projector, showing graphs and statistics. "Studies show that companies with strong social responsibility have better reputations, greater customer loyalty, and, in the long run, better financial results." For nearly 2 hours, Alex laid out his plan. It wasn't just about Clara's music project, it was a complete overhaul of how the company interacted with the community. Scholarships, training programs, partnerships with public schools. In the end, the silence was different. Some councillors seemed intrigued, others still skeptical. "It's a bold proposal," said Abigail Rossi, the youngest member of the council. "But it could work. We would need a detailed plan for implementation." Alex nodded, grateful for the support. "We're already working on it, and I'd like to invite you all to come and see one of these projects up close." The following Saturday, to Clara and the children's surprise, the small room in the community center received unusual visitors. Businessmen in casual, still uncomfortable clothes observed the music lessons. Alex watched everything from afar, next to Isabel. He saw the exact moment when the face of Carlo Fischer, the most skeptical advisor, lit up when he saw a boy of about 10 years old playing the violin with passion. "Who is that boy?" Carlo asked Clara. "That's Caleb. 6 months ago he could barely speak. Now through music he expresses himself in ways we never imagined possible." Alex walked over. "Carlo, what do you think?" The executive hesitated for a moment. "That's impressive. But Alex, how are we going to measure the return on investment on something like that?" Before Alex could respond, Isabel interjected, "Maybe not everything needs to be measured in money, Mr. Fischer. Sometimes the true value is in the impact we make." Carlo looked at the teenager in surprise, then back at Alex. "Your daughter is wise, Miller. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time we thought differently." As the executives continued their visit, Alex stepped away for a moment, feeling emotionally overwhelmed. That was when he noticed Clara watching him from afar. "Thank you," he said, moving closer to her, "for all of this." Clara smiled, but There was a shadow in her eyes. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Miller. The path you've chosen will not be easy." "What do you mean?" "Changing a system is not simple. There will be resistance, perhaps even retaliation." Clara's words sounded like an omen, and indeed they were. What Alex didn't know was that at that very moment, in an office in the city's financial district, a group of disgruntled investors were already making plans to thwart his new vision. The storm brewing behind the scenes of the corporate world would soon engulf not only Alex but everyone around him, and it would take all the strength, courage, and compassion he had rediscovered to face what lay ahead. The news exploded. Like a bomb across all financial media. Miller Empire under attack, shareholders question company's new direction. Alex scanned the headlines on his tablet, feeling the weight of each word. "Dad!" Isabel walked into her home office, concern evident on her face. "Is everything okay?" Alex forced a smile. "It will be, dear. It's just bumps in the road." But he knew there was more to it than that. In recent days, a series of mysterious leaks had hit the press, questioning his leadership skills and suggesting that his new focus on social projects was the result of emotional manipulation. The phone rang. It was Frida, his secretary. "Mr. Miller, do you have a moment? There's something you need to see." Minutes later, Alex stared at an email on his screen. It was from an anonymous sender, but the contents were clear. Documents detailing his actions during the hostile takeover of Eric Vasquez's company years ago. It included doctored contracts, compromising emails, everything he had done to destroy his former partner. How did they manage that?" Alex muttered, feeling the blood run cold in his veins. "I don't know, sir," Frida replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But there's more. They're threatening to make everything public if you don't resign from the presidency and abandon your new social projects." Alex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his past crashing down on him. Everything he had built, everything he was trying to fix could crumble in a matter of hours. "Father?" Isabel's voice brought him back to reality. She was still there, watching him with concern. "Isabel, he began, but the words failed. "Him. It's about the past, isn't it?" she asked softly. "About what you did to Clara's father." Alex nodded, unable to hide the truth from his daughter. "I've made terrible mistakes, Isabel. I've hurt people, and now it can all come to light." To his surprise, Isabel reached out and took his hand. "Dad, remember what Clara always says? That everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe it's time for you to give yourself that chance." At that moment, Alex made a decision. He stood up, determined. "Frida, cancel all my appointments and schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning." "But sir, what are you going to do?" asked Frida, alarmed. "I'll tell you the truth, all of it." The hours that followed were a whirlwind. Alex spent the night drafting a statement, reliving every wrong choice, every selfish decision that had led him to this point. By the time the sun rose, he was exhausted but resolute. The Miller Building conference room was packed with reporters when Alex walked in. Cameras flashed, and an anxious buzz filled the room. He noticed Clara and Isabel sitting unobtrusively in the back of the room, both wearing expressions of silent support. Alex stood behind the lectern, staring out at the sea of expectant faces. He took a deep breath and began. "Good morning, everyone. I stand here today not as the CEO of one of the largest companies in the country, but as a man facing his past. 15 years ago, I committed acts that stained my soul and destroyed lives." As Alex unraveled his confession, a stunned silence fell over the room. He spared no detail, admitting every manipulation, every betrayal, especially against Eric Vasquez. "And that is why, from today onwards, I not only maintain my commitment to social projects, but I also announce the creation of a special fund in the name of Eric Vasquez to support young ethical entrepreneurs." When he finished, the silence continued for a few seconds before the room exploded with questions. Alex answered them one by one with an honesty that surprised even himself. Hours later, exhausted but relieved, Alex found Clara and Isabel waiting for him in his office. "You did the right thing, Dad," Isabel said, hugging him. Clara looked at him with a mixture of respect and something more understanding, perhaps. My father always said that true strength lies in admitting our mistakes and trying to fix them, she said softly. Alex nodded, feeling a huge weight lift off his shoulders. What happens now? He asked, more to himself than to them. Now, Clara replied, we begin to rebuild, not just your company or your reputation, but something bigger, a different way of doing business, of impacting lives. What Alex didn't know was that his public confession had stirred forces far beyond his comprehension. As they talked, phones rang in offices across the city, emails were exchanged, and a new wave of change began to take shape in the Brazilian corporate world. The storm he had feared had not yet completely passed, but now, for the first time in years, Alex felt he was on the right side of history. And that, he realized, was worth more than all the millions he had already accumulated. In the weeks that followed the press conference, Alex Miller's name was in the headlines. Opinions were divided. Some called him a coward for admitting his mistakes only when pressed. Others praised him for his courage in facing his past publicly. The impact on the company was immediate. Some shares plummeted, business partners hesitated, and there were even resignations. But surprisingly, new supporters, companies, and investors interested in the new vision of ethical and socially responsible business that Alex was proposing also emerged. One particularly tense afternoon, Alex was in his office reviewing reports when Frida walked in looking nervous. Mr. Miller, there's someone here to see you. She says she's Eric Vasquez's widow. Alex felt his heart race. Sophia, is she here? Moments later, a middle-aged woman with grey hair and tired but determined eyes entered the room. Alex stood up, unsure of how to act. Sophia, I didn't come here to receive your apology, Alex, she interrupted him, her voice firm. I came because I want to understand. Why now? Why after all this time? Alex pointed to a chair and they both sat down. He looked into the eyes of the woman he had indirectly harmed years ago. Because I realized how wrong I was. Because I met his daughter, Clara, and saw in her all the goodness and strength that Eric had. And because I don't want to live with this burden anymore. Sophia watched him for a long moment, as if trying to read his soul. Eric always believed that you would one day realize your mistakes. Even in your final days, he said there was good in you, hidden beneath layers of ambition. The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Tears he didn't even know he could shed began to form in his eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, his voice breaking. No, you don't, Sophia agreed. But Eric taught us that forgiveness isn't about deserving it. It's about letting go, and maybe it's time for all of us to let go of this past. At that moment, Clara walked into the room, looking surprised to see her mother there. Mum, what are you doing here? Sophia stood up, hugging her daughter. Doing what your father would want us to do. Building bridges, not walls. The three generations present, Alex, Sophia, and Clara, represented a cycle of pain, but also of possible redemption. It was Clara who broke the silence. What if we use this as a new beginning? Not just for ourselves, but for so many others who could benefit. In the days that followed, an idea began to take shape. The Eric Vasquez Fund, initially intended only for young entrepreneurs, expanded. With Sophia's guidance and Clara's enthusiasm, it became a much larger initiative. Thus was born the New Chords Project, a fusion between the corporate world and social projects. The idea was to use music as a tool for social transformation, offering not only classes, but also professional guidance, scholarships, and even incubators for small cultural businesses. The project quickly gained traction. Other businesses, inspired by Alex's change, began to get involved. What started as a small music class at a community center was turning into a nationwide movement. Isabel, now more involved than ever, brought a young and innovative perspective to the project. She suggested partnerships with digital influencers and famous artists, further expanding the reach of the initiative. One afternoon, while watching a rehearsal by an orchestra made up entirely of young people from the project, Alex felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Clara. "You know, Mr. Miller," she said with a slight smile, "my father always said that music has the power to heal souls. I think he would be proud to see that." Alex nodded, feeling emotional. "I still have a lot to learn and a lot to fix, Clara, but I promise I'll do my best to honor your father's legacy." What Alex didn't know was that his actions were making waves far beyond that auditorium. In offices across the country, executives were beginning to rethink their strategies. The international press was beginning to notice the transformation of one of the country's largest companies. A silent revolution was underway, and it all started with a simple musical note on any given afternoon. The main auditorium of the city's municipal theatre was packed. This was no ordinary concert. It was the grand debut of the Novos Accordes Orchestra, composed entirely of young people from the Novos Accordes project. In the front row, Alex Miller sat between Isabel and Clara, his heart pounding anxiously. The conductor prepared to begin the concert. Alex couldn't help but reflect on the journey that brought him there. A year had passed since his public confession. A year of challenges, transformations, and surprisingly growth. Miller, after an initial decline, was recovering impressively. The new business model, focused on social responsibility and sustainability, was attracting a new profile of investors and partners. The Novos Accordes project had expanded beyond its wildest expectations. Now present in 5 states, it had already impacted the lives of more than 10,000 young people. But the numbers, while impressive, did not tell the whole story. Alex thought of Caleb, the shy boy who barely spoke and was now the first violin in the orchestra, of Abigail, who had come off the streets and now taught percussion, of so many others whose lives had been transformed by music and opportunity. The lights dimmed and silence fell over the theatre. The conductor raised his baton, and the first chords of Asa Branca filled the air. This was no ordinary interpretation of Luis Gonzaga's classic composition. It was a special arrangement, blending elements of classical music with Brazilian rhythms. As the music flowed, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. He looked at Clara, who was smiling with tears in her eyes, probably thinking about her father. At Isabel, who was watching everything with a mixture of pride and admiration. During the break, Alex was approached by a man he recognized as a prominent economic journalist. "Mr. Miller," the journalist began, "a year ago, many were betting on the end of your career and your company. Today you are the model for a new kind of business. How do you feel?" Alex thought for a moment before answering. "I feel humbled and grateful. Grateful that I had the chance to right my wrongs, to make a real difference. But this isn't about me, it's about these kids, about the transformative power of music, of education, of opportunity." The journalist nodded, taking notes. "What about the future? There are rumors that the new Chords project model is being studied by other large companies, even internationally." "The future?" Alex smiled. "The future is up there on the stage. These young people, they are the future. Our responsibility is to open doors, create opportunities. The rest, they will do on their own." When the concert resumed, Alex noticed something different on the stage. Clara had joined the orchestra, sitting at the piano. The conductor announced, "To close our evening, we have a special composition, Sinfonia do Amanhã, composed by our dear Clara Vasquez, in homage to her father Eric, and to all who believe in the power of change." The first notes of the piano filled the air, soon joined by the other instruments. It was a melody that spoke of pain, of overcoming, but mainly of hope. Alex closed his eyes, letting himself be carried away by the music. At that moment, he saw clearly the path ahead. It would not be easy. There would be obstacles, critics, moments of doubt. But now he had a purpose greater than profits and financial statements. As the last note rang out, the silence that followed was almost reverential before the audience erupted in applause. Alex found himself on his feet, applauding with tears in his eyes, as did many others in the audience. At the end of the night, as people left the theatre still talking emotionally about the concert, Alex was approached by Sophia, Eric's widow. "Eric was right about you, Alex," she said softly. "There was goodness in your heart. It just needed to be rediscovered." Alex nodded, at a loss for words to express what he felt. Sophia continued, "What you're doing here is more than music. It's hope. It's showing that there's always a path to redemption, to making a difference." As he walked home that night, hand in hand with Isabel and accompanied by Clara, Alex Miller knew his journey of transformation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The sound of Symphony of Tomorrow still echoed in his ears, a constant reminder that each day was a new opportunity to make a difference, to build a better future, and he was determined not to waste a single moment of this new chance that life had given him. 5 years had passed since that memorable night at the Municipal Theatre. Alex's office at the top of the Miller Building had changed considerably. The walls, once decorated with corporate awards, now displayed photos of young musicians, certificates for social projects, and prominently, a large photo of the Novos Accordes Orchestra performing at Carnegie Hall in New York. Alex, now with a few grey hairs at his temples, was sitting at his desk, analyzing the latest reports from the New Chords project, when Isabel entered, accompanied by Clara. "Dad, we're ready for the meeting," said Isabel, now a young woman of 21, studying business administration and an intern at the company. Clara, at 25, had become the executive director of the Novos Accordes project, transforming it into an organization with international reach. "Great," Alex replied, standing up. "The board is eager to hear about expansion into Latin America." As they walked to the conference room, Alex couldn't help but reflect on how things had changed. Miller, once a symbol of corporate greed, was now recognized worldwide as a pioneer in socially responsible business. The model they had started had inspired a wave of change in the Brazilian business world and beyond. In the meeting room, familiar and new faces awaited them. Among the board members was Sofia Vasquez, who had accepted a position as special advisor for social projects. "Before we begin," Alex said, "I'd like to share something with you." He turned on the projector, and a series of images began to appear. Children in makeshift classrooms learning music, young people performing on important stages, former students of the project, now teachers or cultural entrepreneurs. "This," he said, his voice breaking, "is the real payoff of our work. It's not just numbers on a balance sheet. It's lives transformed, dreams realized, communities strengthened." Clara then took the floor. "And that's why we're here today, to expand that impact. Our expansion plan for Latin America is not just about growth, it's about creating a network of social transformation through music and education." For nearly 2 hours, Clara and Isabel presented their ambitious expansion plan. Partnerships with local governments, collaborations with renowned artists, cultural exchange programs. The project was no longer just about teaching music, but about using art as a tool for social and economic development. At the end of the presentation, the silence in the room was broken by enthusiastic applause. Even the most conservative members of the board seemed impressed. Sophia was the first to speak. "Eric always said that the true wealth of a country is in its people, in its culture. What you are doing is exactly that. You are investing in the greatest treasure we have." After the meeting, Alex, Clara, and Isabel met at the old community center where it all began. The place was now a modern cultural center, but still maintained the welcoming essence of its early days. "Remember your first day here?" Clara asked, looking around nostalgically. Alex nodded. "How could I forget? It was the day I began to relearn what really matters in life." Isabel smiled, taking her father's and Clara's hands. "And look where we've come, but there's still so much to do." At that moment, a group of children ran past them, musical instruments in hand, laughter echoing through the hallways. Alex felt his heart fill with an emotion he now recognized. Well, hope. "You know," he said, looking at Clara and Isabel, "your mother, Lena, used to say that life is like a great symphony. Each of us has our own melody to contribute." Clara nodded, her eyes shining. "And the beauty is in how these melodies intertwine, creating something greater than ourselves." As they walked through the center, observing the classes in progress, the rehearsals, the luthier workshops, Alex reflected on his journey. From a ruthless businessman to an agent of change, from someone who saw the world in black and white to someone who now appreciated every nuance, every note. The sound of a violin reached his ears. It was Caleb, that shy boy from years ago. Now a talented young man teaching a new generation. The melody continues, Alex murmured, more to himself than to the others. Isabel hugged him. And it will continue, Father, through every life we touch, every opportunity we create. Clara added, and through each person that inspires us to make a difference just as you inspired us. As the sun set outside, painting the city sky in shades of orange and pink, Alex Miller understood that his true legacy would not be measured in numbers or actions, but in the lives he had changed, in the melodies he had helped create that would continue long after he was gone. And so in a former community center, transformed into a beacon of hope, 3 generations, Alex, Clara, and Isabel, looked to the future, ready to compose the next movements of a symphony that was far from over. Symphony of change, of redemption, and above all of love.